Assalamualaikum, sir.
हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आवाज़ आ रही है सारों को?
जी
अच्छा चले ठीक है। क्या कहना, लास्ट टाइम वी डिड यूनिफिकेशन राइट? ये क्लियर है ना सारों को? द प्रॉब्लम्स कॉज्ड बाय फर्टिलाइजर, इज दैट क्लियर? क्लियर है कि नहीं क्लियर है? बस आवाज़ आ रही है? हेलो Ahmed, Nabila, here, is this clear? Can you guys hear me?
yes sir.
ठीक है। अच्छा, so we did unification, and now what we're going to do is okay, we need to do further problems caused by fertilizer, and that's not fertilizers. Although this is about environment, but we need to do acid rain as well. Okay, so this is a pollutant. It's got something to do with acids and bases, so it's better to study it over here.
सर एक
अच्छा,
क्वेश्चन है, ये लास्ट चैप्टर में नहीं है केमिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट वाले में?
हाँ उसी में ना, लेकिन वो उसका एसिड बेसिस से ही ताल्लुक है ना।
सही
तो वो तो सिलेबस असल में अजीब सा बना होता है कि वो जो चीज़ें इकट्ठे हैं वो आप फिर इकट्ठे पढ़ो ना।
सही।
तो उधर भी पढ़ लेंगे दोबारा से, ठीक है। लेकिन एसिड रेन समझ तो इधर आएगा ना, बिकॉज वी आर डीलिंग विद एसिड्स। अच्छा, now this one, acid rain. What's acid rain? They mainly two pollutants. ठीक है, नॉन मेटल ऑक्साइड्स जो ना, they all we already discussed, they were acidic, right? So non-metal oxides are mostly acidic. ये last class में we went over this in the last class के somewhere over here. हाँ, ये acidic oxides किधर वो पे? Yeah, this one. Somewhere over here we did discuss that non-metal oxides, they tend to be acidic because when they dissolve in water, sulfur dioxide, NO2, P2O5, carbon dioxide, they all actually turn into acids. ठीक है, तो sulfur dioxide would form sulfuric acid, nitrogen oxides will form nitric acid, right? So they all eventually turn into acids. Now going back to this, what's acid rain? So, so what's acid rain? Non-metal oxides are mostly acidic. There are two pollutants. One is sulfur dioxide, that's number one. How is that produced? It's produced when sulfur burns. अच्छा, where does sulfur burn? During coal or fossil fuel combustions. What happens that the sulfur reacts with oxygen and it ends up producing sulfur dioxide. The other one is that it's volcanic activity. that also produces the same thing. Because kind of volcanoes have a lot of sulfur in them, and when it reacts, so it ends up producing sulfur dioxide. ठीक है, बल्कि इसके ऊपर ना volcanic activity पे there's a thing that is uh, volcanic activity. में there was an event, I think around 50,000 years ago. There was a volcano that erupted, and that volcano ended up producing so much sulfur dioxide that almost all the human population eventually died because of that. There was so much sulfur dioxide produced by that volcano, and that could happen again. If there's a volcano and that a large volcano erupts and produces a lot of sulfur dioxide, that will produce so much मतलब जो आपकी global जो ecosystem है ना, it will get so much disturbed by that. So around 50,000 years ago, the human population was almost extinct. There were only 1,000 humans left on the planet because of this. So अभी भी ये कि volcanic activity plays a significant role in our environment. ठीक है? I said the second source of pollution and acid rain is nitrogen oxides. So NO2 or I mean there are lots of different formulas of nitrogen oxides. The most common one is NO2, but NOx like there because you might see some other formulas as well. I said now, how is that produced? So the way it is produced is that 78% of the environment or the atmosphere, all the air that's around you, that is nitrogen. So most of it is just nitrogen. And nitrogen, remember, is very unreactive. It's extremely unreactive. Or it has why is it very unreactive? Because it's got a triple bond. So the bond is very strong. Okay, it is very difficult to break this bond. So that is N2. But what happens is, okay, number one, car engines. Car engines are extremely hot. And if they're extremely hot, what happens is that they burn air. So they burn air at high temperatures. Okay, they have very high temperatures. So because car engines are taking in air, the air ends up bumping into the oxygen molecules and they start reacting. So they start producing NO2 or any other nitrogen oxide. And so there's another place where the air heats up, and that is lightning strikes. So during thunderstorms, the nitrogen and oxygen they react again and they produce the same thing, which is NO2 or any other oxide of nitrogen. Okay? So they end up reacting. Otherwise, it's very hard for nitrogen to react.
तो जितने कम बॉन्ड बनाएगा उतना ज्यादा रिएक्टिव होगा, राइट?
नहीं, ये देखो इसका बॉन्ड बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग है ना, इट्स ट्रिपल बॉन्ड ना.
सही.
वो रिएक्शन होता किस तरह के? For example, there's an N2 molecule. Now that's a very strong bond, ठीक है? So it's very hard to break. So which is why most of the time it doesn't do anything. And there's an oxygen molecule that also has a kind of a tough bond. The two are going to bump into each other. It's our car collision नहीं होती. And there are chances that the bond would break. But that chance is very, very low because the bond is very strong. So during collisions, the bond only breaks if they are colliding at very high speeds. And that only happens at very, very high temperatures. Okay? So for the air molecules to react, for these two to react, you need to have really high temperatures, which is why this happens in car engines and in lightning strikes. Okay? Or car engines, anyways, we're actually using less and less combustion engines. So this problem would kind of go away because we're moving towards electric motors. So, but car engines have done this damage. They've produced a lot of pollutants. So, anyways, next is when these oxides are produced in the environment, the nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide are acidic oxides, and they react together in the atmosphere. So they start reacting together in the atmosphere, and when they react together, इसकी equation याद कर लो. So when they react together, NO2 reacts with SO2, and it turns it into NO and SO3. And that NO then gets oxidized in air again and turns back into NO2. So it's acting as a catalyst. Meaning it remains unchanged. Okay. I mean, catalyst की property it doesn't change, and it just helps the reaction. So NO2 ना अपना oxygen जो है वो SO2, it gives an oxygen to SO2, turns it into SO3, and then because it lost an oxygen, it gains an oxygen from the air back again and turns back into NO2. And so, anyways, this is the thing. Here, the pollutants pollutants they mix when it rains with rain. So we have already done this equation, which is that SO3 when it mixes with rain, what happens? What acid would be produced? It's going to produce sulfuric acid, right? And similarly, we did this again. NO2 reacts with water. So what acid would it produce? It would produce two acids. One is nitric acid, and the other one is nitrous acid. So it's going to produce a mixture of the two acids. You get balance के लिए I've added NO2. So this is known as acid rain because your rain just it doesn't only have water in it; it's got acids in it as well. Okay, so these are pollutants that are mixing with rain. Is that clear?
Safe.
So this is how acid rain gets produced. And then there are harmful effects of acid rain which need to be discussed. So the harmful effects that are caused by acid rain, number one, limestone, marble, metal structures, corrode. Yeah, because we know okay, metals, for example, if something is made of iron, we know that it reacts with sulfuric acid. What would we produce? Metal plus acid, it's going to produce FeSO4, that's the salt, and plus hydrogen gas would be given off. Uh, limestone and marble are basically calcium carbonate. We know that carbonates also react. Calcium carbonate would react with sulfuric acid, and it would produce calcium sulfate plus water plus CO2. Okay, so they're both going to react, and the structures would corrode. Okay, Taj Mahal, etc. Any building that's made out of marble or limestone. Limestone bhi na wahi hota. It's kind of it's chalk-like substance which makes cement. Metal structures, bridges, etc. They would grow. That's number one. Now, number two is it's going to cause skin and eye irritation because it's obviously going to fall on our skins. So number three is water bodies and soil becomes acidic. And what that would do is that agriculture, plants and animals would be affected. Okay, so your plants, okay, they are going to be affected. So you've got all of this happening, harmful effects. Okay, that's what's happening in harmful effects. इसके अंदर they're going to be very specific. So, okay, for okay, harmful effects on humans, so that's going to be skin and eye irritation. On buildings, it's going to be, so make sure you read the question properly. So the next thing that needs to be done is that, yeah, how do you get rid of acid rain? यहाँ तक सारों को clear है? Is this clear? Ibad, Ahmed, Abira, is this clear? Yeah, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
अच्छा, you're not how to get rid of acid rain, right? Okay, not acid rain, these are known as flue gases. Which are basically sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. So what is done is that limestone, which is chalk or marble, and lime are used. Limestone is basically calcium carbonate and lime is calcium oxide. Both are uh, almost the same. I mean, they're both bases. This is a base. चार bases. The carbonates were basic, oxides, hydroxide, and the calcium hydroxide. Oxide and hydroxide, they're almost the same thing. So these were all basic substances. So what they would do is they would react with the flue gases, which are SO2. Unka naam hai SO2, NO2, they're often known as flue gases. So they're going to react with SO2. Remember, I told you early on that when you think of SO2, think of the acid which is sulfurous acid. इसमें water add करो ना, it's going to form H2SO3. So when you think of SO2 or when you think of any non-metal oxides, don't think of the oxide, think of it as the acid that it's going to form when you add water to it. So what is calcium carbonate reacting with sulfurous acid? That's going to form the salt, which is calcium sulfide. Plus, it's going to give off water and carbon dioxide. Water मैं यहाँ से हटा देता हूँ क्योंकि in the reaction, or I can simply add water over here. So the reason I'm removing water from the equation is that I didn't actually add water to it. ठीक है? अगर इसके साथ reaction होता ना, if it had been this thing, salt, water, and carbon dioxide would be added. But since I'm not actually making a reaction with this, I'm making a reaction with this, so I subtracted the water from the equation.
वैसे एक जनरल सवाल है जिसमें जिस भी लाइक एक्सपेरिमेंट में वाटर फॉर्म हो गया तो उसकी पीएच न्यूट्रल ही होगी।
हाँ तो वही ना, तो न्यूट्रल ही कर रहे ना।
नहीं लाइक जिसमें भी वाटर प्रोड्यूस हो गया तो वो न्यूट्रल लाइक उसकी पूरे सॉल्यूशन की पीएच लाइक वही होगी न्यूट्रल 7।
वो खाली उसकी वजह से नहीं, एक तो वाटर फॉर्म हुआ है प्लस कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड इज गैस, सो लेट्स अज्यूम के इट एस्केप्ड एंड दिस इज अ सॉल्ट, राइट? तो सॉल्ट का पीएच क्या होता है? दैट्स आल्सो न्यूट्रल, राइट? So my acidic oxide has been neutralized. ठीक है, is this clear? The same is the case with
Yes, sir.
oxide with SO2. So again, in this case, you are not going to think of it as SO2, you're going to think of it as H2SO3. So it's going to form calcium sulfide plus water. लेकिन क्योंकि मैं water add ही नहीं करा, so I'm not going to write water in the equation. ठीक है, so a salt is produced. अच्छा, so So remember, lime and limestone are going to help you neutralize. They're going to turn the sulfur oxides, the phosphorus oxides, because they're going to turn all of them into salts. So if you react calcium carbonate with NO2, तो वो कौन सा acid था? NO2 would form either nitric acid or nitrous acid, right? It would actually form both acids when you add water to it. So my salt that would be produced in this case would be calcium nitrate or calcium nitrite, ठीक है, plus CO2. So any oxide, if I react calcium carbonate with, I mean, there are other oxides as well, P2O5, which is, कौन सा acid बता रहा है? P2O5, if you mix water to it, it's going to form phosphoric acid. So it's going to form calcium phosphate plus water plus carbon dioxide, ठीक है? So keep this in mind that lime and limestone are used in factories and chimneys and exhaust gases to get rid of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxides. Okay, they would all turn the acidic oxides, okay, which are your pollutants, and they neutralize it. Okay. और मैं फिर से रिवाइज करा रहा हूँ कि acidic oxides were the ones that we discussed early on. Okay, where are your acidic oxides? These ones. Most of your non-metal oxides, they all turn into acids when you mix them in water, right? So lime and limestone are the two main things, and you could have used any base actually, but the thing is, कि जो abundant lime and limestone are very abundant. Chalk, ठीक है, marble, etc., and limestone specifically, that's very abundant in the Earth's crust. ठीक है, that's present almost everywhere. So is this clear? How do you get rid of sulfur dioxide and NO2? You add lime or limestone.
Yes, sir.
And the next one is the next gear. So we already got rid of acid rain. हाँ, soil क्या था? Soil.
तो वो कैटलिक कन्वर्टर भी तो यूज करते हैं।
ये acid rain का तो उससे कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है. अच्छा, same lime and limestone are used in soils, in acidic soils. Okay, in acidic soils, they have a lot of acid in them. So the same limestone is used. For example, there is sulfuric acid. So it's going, if there's sulfuric acid in the soil because of acid rain, so it's going to do what? It's going to form calcium sulfate plus water plus carbon dioxide. And they might ask you for the ionic equation as well. So if you write the ionic equation, anything that is, वो क्या था? How do you write ionic equation? Anything that is aqueous, it
सर
will
लाइक इस इक्वेशन का मतलब है कि सॉइल के अंदर H2SO4 था तो हमने CaCO3 डाला, राइट?
हाँ, अरे ये मैं लिख देता हूँ. This is soil, and अच्छा, this is soil, and it had, अच्छा, it had H2SO4 ठीक है in it. तो करना ये कि I mean, I'm just writing the ionic equation, which is, how do you write the ionic equation? You're going to separate the aqueous substances into the ions, because the ions would be floating separately in water, right? So if I do that, it's going to be calcium carbonate is a solid, so that means the ions are together. Sulfuric acid, there are two ions, H plus 1 and SO4 minus 2, they're aqueous, but they're no longer together, so I've separated them and they're 2H plus 1. As a calcium sulfate, again, it's aqueous, so the ions calcium and sulfate ions are no longer together. calcium is group 2 plus 2, sulfate is minus 2, and they are no longer together. Water is a liquid and CO2 is a gas. Okay. So which one is the spectator ion in this equation? Yeah, but which one is spectator ion remains completely unchanged during the reaction?
SO4.
SO4 is completely unchanged. So basically your ionic equation for limestone reacting with the acid in the soil, that is calcium plus 2 aqueous, and water liquid and CO2 gas. As anyways, वो ionic equation मैंने वैसे ही लिख दिया. All I wanted to state was that lime and limestone are used in acidic soils to neutralize acidic soils. Okay. So, because we've just covered too much of it and very quickly, so I'm just going to मैं थोड़ा इसको break down करके I'm just going to revise everything. इसमें थोड़ा सा रह तो नहीं गया? नहीं, it's I'm just going to add one equation because it was lime and limestone, right? So calcium hydroxide does kind of the same thing. Okay? If there's sulfuric acid in the soil, so it will also form calcium sulfate plus water. Okay? So both lime and limestone are going to neutralize acidic soils. Anyways, because we the last for the part and we just covered too many things, so I'm just going to revise everything. Okay? Remember the nature of the oxides. We did acidic oxides, and we did basic oxides, and we did amphoteric oxides. Okay? So metal oxides were normally basic oxides, and non-metal oxides were the ones that were acidic oxides.
The calcium hydroxide soluble है, right? Aqueous है.
Partially है वो.
Right.
ठीक है.
So अपने solid में consider होगा या?
उसको solid ही consider कर लो. ठीक है. Amphoteric. For amphoteric, I told you that the middle ones, the middle oxide, zinc oxide, aluminum oxide, lead oxide, the ones that are on the border between metals and non-metals, they show both properties. So we discussed how to test or determine whether an oxide is amphoteric or acidic or basic. What you do is that if it's amphoteric, it will dissolve both in an acid and in an alkali. It's going to react with both. If it's acidic, so here it will only react with the alkali. And if it's basic, then it will only react with the acid. So वो एक तरीका था. बाकी we did यहाँ पे ना I told you that how to make equations with non-metal oxides. Okay, if you see carbon dioxide, don't think of it as carbon dioxide. Think of it as carbonic acid. If you think of sulfur trioxide, don't think of it as sulfur trioxide. Think of it as sulfuric acid. P2O5, उसको P2O5 नहीं समझना, उसको think of it as phosphoric acid. So it would be acidic oxides. It would be a lot easier to make equations with bases. ठीक है. Remember हमने 4 equations की थी. Bases 4 थी. You had ammonia, you had metal oxide, metal hydroxide, and metal carbonate. So खैर वो percentage हमने निकाली थी. We found the percentage in fertilizers. We did eutrophication and NPK fertilizers. And this was about pollutants, about acid rain. I told you that acid rain is produced by sulfur dioxide, which is coal and fossil fuel combustion and volcanic activity, because all the sulfur starts burning up and starts producing sulfur dioxide. You've got nitrogen oxides. There's a lot of nitrogen in the air, which is unreactive because it's got a strong triple bond. Lekin at high temperatures, it's going to react. And in lightning strikes, it's going to react as well. And it would form NO2 or any other nitrogen oxide. And they react together, they form SO3, and then they mix SO2, SO3 and NO2, they mix with rainwater, and they end up forming acids, which is going to fall from the sky. So water में चला जाता है, buildings पे, it falls on the buildings, it goes into the soil, So the harmful effects are that your buildings, marble structures, metal structures, they start corroding. Iron would obviously react with an acid. Metal plus acid produces salt plus H2. Carbonates, which is chalk or limestone or marble, that also reacts with the acid, and they start forming salt, water, and carbon dioxide, skin and eye irritation. The water bodies and soil would become acidic. How do you get rid of these acidic gases? You use two things, lime and limestone. Both of them are bases, metal oxide, metal hydroxide, metal carbonate. Okay? And this is very abundant in the Earth's crust. मतलब हमारी bones भी ना are made of the same stuff. Our bones are made out of, I think they're made out of calcium carbonate. It's basically our teeth are also made out of calcium. वो इसलिए वो calcium का add आता रहता है कि दूध पियो तो. So so calcium is something that is very abundant in the Earth's crust. So so calcium carbonate, these bases, they would be used to react with these acidic gases. ठीक है वो react करने का तरीका जो है ना, I've told you that don't think of sulfur dioxide as sulfur dioxide. Think of it as sulfurous acid. So it's a base reacting with an acid and it's going to produce salt. So the gas will get neutralized. Phosphorus oxide is the, or if you're admin, I did lime and limestone are also used in acidic soils. Now there's one more question which is often asked, and that is if fertilizers and lime or limestone are not to be used together. Okay, they are not to be used together. Fertilizers and lime and limestone. Uh, what does that mean? If fertilizer and lime and limestone are not to be used together. Fertilizers we discussed earlier, they were NPK salts. I see this question is very important because it's slightly tricky and it's important. Like let's say it's they this one has a lot of marks as well. So I told you NPK salts, and they're mostly ammonium salts. For example, NPK, NH4, ammonium sulfate, SO4 is -2, so it's going to be NH4 plus 1 twice. Ammonium nitrate, that's got a lot of N in it. NH4 is +1, NO3 is -1. Ammonium phosphate, PO4 is -3, so it's going to be NH4 thrice. So all these ammonium salts, they are fertilizers. And lime or limestone are basically calcium oxide, calcium hydroxide, or even calcium carbonate. They were added. Why were you adding them? To neutralize acidic soils. But the plants don't want acidic soil, so they were added. And fertilizer is obviously they're fertilizers. Now, what happens is that both of these things, they react together. Okay? And the reaction is, if, for example, if I have ammonium nitrate, that's my fertilizer. And if I have a base like calcium hydroxide, that's a base, Ca plus 2, OH minus 1. What happens is the NH4 wants to lose H plus 1, or it can lose H plus 1 ions. और यहाँ पे क्या होता है? If this is your lime that I've added, your OH ions, they want to accept H plus 1 ions. You can remember start when right at the beginning we did discuss this that an acid is a species that if you have an acid, it's a species that loses H plus 1. A base is a species that gains H plus one ions. So what basically happens is कि जो NH4 है ना and the OH they react together. So this one loses H plus one ions. So if the NH4 loses the H, what will be formed? It will form ammonia gas. And if the OH accepts H plus one ions, so it will form water. So पीछे क्या रह गया? It's C and NO3 that's left. Right? Those are the two things that are left. So the two things tend to react together and this produce salt ammonia and water. Okay. So again, a small reminder, which is that the ammonium ions, so this is my sixth reaction. Okay, this is the final reaction. This is the end of acid base and salts. Remember, this is the toughest topic in the whole of. Iske aage piche everything is easy. This one we will do a lot of past paper questions. We'll go over the notes once again. Okay, this one is the most difficult. This is your sixth equation, which is that any ammonium compound, the NH4 has a tendency to lose H plus one, and the OH, जो कि हमने we classified it as a base early on, has a very high tendency to accept H plus one. So the OH, उसका H जो है ना छीन लेती है. The OH turns into water, and the NH4 loses the H and turns into ammonia. And there are two things left. That's calcium and NO3. They would end up forming salt. And what happens then is the ammonia gas escapes. So the percentage of N decreases in the soil. हमने fertilizers, why were we adding fertilizers? Fertilizers were added so that the plants could have a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. But the trouble is, if the fertilizer ends up reacting with the lime that you were specifically adding to neutralize acidic soils, so they're going to react together and ammonia gas would escape, and the fertilizer would be ineffective. क्योंकि plants को तो मिला नहीं, all of the N turned into ammonia and escaped from the soil. The plants were not able to absorb the nitrogen. Okay? So this is the last equation. And I'm going to repeat any ammonium, like let's say if I have ammonium sulfate, and let's say it reacts with lime, let's say calcium oxide. Remember, oxide and hydroxide are kind of the same thing. This is a base, and this is the one that's going to lose the H. So the NH4 would lose the H, it will become NH3. And the O will accept the H and it will become water. And CnSO4 would be your salt that's going to be produced. Okay? So but it's not that difficult an equation. It's a simple equation. Any base that you add with an ammonium salt. So करना ये, the fertilizer should not be added while you're adding lime to it. The purpose of the lime was different. The purpose of the lime was to neutralize the acid rain that had fallen on the soil. Okay, that is why we were adding lime or limestone uh, to the soil. So लेकिन fertilizers or lime को ना, they should not mix because they would end up reacting with each other. ठीक है, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, this was the last equation. This was the sixth equation that we did. So ठीक है, we'll keep on revising this. We'll start doing a lot of past paper questions on this topic, specifically on this topic. The topic has still not ended actually because there's a thing called salt analysis. So we'll go through that as well. You can remember this one, the acid basis salts, that's a big topic, and a big chunk of the rest of the chemistry also depends on that. But this is the only topic that is actually very difficult because there's a lot of small stuff in it. ठीक है? ये मैं बिल्कुल class के बाद I'm sending the notes again. Make sure you keep revising this. This is the most important topic in chemistry. ठीक है? So we would have to practice a lot. So we'll do a lot of past paper questions on this. So Do them tomorrow then, ठीक है? चले, okay, कोई
ओके
question
सर,
है
अल्लाह
कुछ?
हाफिज।
अल्लाह हाफिज।